Omniscience, mainly in religion, is the capacity to know everything that there is to know. In particular, Hinduism and the Abrahamic religions believe that there is a divine being who is omniscient. An omniscient point of view, in writing, is to know everything that can be known about a character, including past history, thoughts, feelings, etc. In Latin, omnis means all, and sciens means knowing. Definitions: there is a distinction between inherent omniscience, the ability to know anything that one chooses to know and can be known. Total omniscience, actually knowing everything that can be known. Some modern Christian theologians argue that God's omniscience is inherent rather than total, and that God chooses to limit his omniscience in order to preserve the free will and dignity of his creatures. John Calvin, among other theologians of the 16th century, comfortable with the definition of God as being omniscient in the total sense, in order for worthy beings' abilities to choose freely, embrace the doctrine of predestination. Controversies: omnipotence is sometimes understood to also imply the capacity to know everything that will be. Non-theism often claims that the very concept of omniscience is inherently contradictory. Whether omniscience, particularly regarding the choices that a human will make, is compatible with free will has been debated by theists and philosophers. The argument that divine foreknowledge is not compatible with free will is known as theological fatalism. Generally, if humans are truly free to choose between different alternatives, it is very difficult to understand how God could know what this choice will be. God created knowledge. Some theists argue that God created all knowledge and has ready access thereto. This statement invokes a circular time contradiction, presupposing the existence of God. Before knowledge existed, there was no knowledge at all, which means that God was unable to possess knowledge prior to its creation. Alternately, if knowledge was not a creation, but merely existed in God's mind for all time, there would be no contradiction. In the mystic thought, which holds God to exist outside of time due to his ability to perceive everything at once, everything which God knows in his mind already exists. Hence, God would know of nothing that was not in existence, and God would also know everything that was in existence, and God would possess this knowledge of what did exist and what did not exist at any point in the history of time. The circular time contradiction can suppose anything concerning God, such as the creation of life, meaning before God created life, he wasn't alive. Moreover, to assume any more attributes, to then say God is merciful, but before the creation of mercy, he wouldn't have been merciful, and before the creation of the concept of negation, no one would have any concept of what is not. These apparent contradictions, however, presuppose that such attributes are separately defined and detached from God, which is not necessarily so. It is not a given that attributes which can be assigned to or used to describe mankind, can be equally ascribed to God. Take good and evil for example. Goodness is biblically defined as that which is of God. It is intrinsic to his being and is revealed most prominently through his provision of Old Testament law, the keeping of which is the very definition of goodness and the neglecting of which is the epitome of evil. A similar argument could be laid down concerning God's omniscience. It even eludes the idea a lot more even to assume the concept of nothing, or negation was created, therefore it is seemingly impossible to conceive such a notion where it draws down to a paradox. Assuming that the creator and creation is separate, and not the same one thing, or process. That it is a this or that notion, instead of a this in that idea. To assume that knowledge in Plato's sense is described to be a belief that's true, it then means that before everything came into being, it was all to be conceived as total imagination by God until the set of truth. One verse, God created man in his own image, states that God imagined the form of humans, taking image as a root word for imagine, mistakenly understood as man to look like God. This verse from Genesis 1 is in the Hebrew Scriptures. The word image is translated from two Hebrew words, demuth, likeness or similitude, and tselem, an obscure word which translates as image or idol. It is difficult, therefore, to make a case for the author's reading of this verse to mean God imagined the form of humans. The above definitions of omniscience cover what is called propositional knowledge, as opposed to experiential knowledge. That some entity is omniscient in the sense of possessing all possible propositional knowledge does not imply that it also possesses all possible experiential knowledge. Opinions differ as to whether the propositionally omniscient God of the theists is able to possess all experiential knowledge as well. But it seems at least obvious that a divine infinite being conceived of as necessary infinitely knowledgeable would also know how, for example, a finite person, man dying feels like as he, God would have access to all knowledge including the obvious experiences of the dying human. There is a third type of knowledge, practical or procedural knowledge. If omniscience is taken to be all knowledge, then all knowledge of all types would be fully known and comprehended. Omniscience versus free will. A question is: an omniscient entity knows everything even about its own decisions in the future. Does it therefore forbid any free will to that entity? William Lane Craig states that the question subdivides into two: 1. If God foreknows the occurrence of some event E, does he happen necessarily? And 2. If some event E is contingent, how can God foreknow a unregistered trademark's occurrence? See Determinism, Free Will and Argument from Free Will, Non-Theological Uses. The field of literary analysis and criticism can discuss omniscience in the point of view of a narrator. An omniscient narrator, almost always a third-person narrator, can reveal insights into characters and settings that would not be otherwise apparent from the events of the story and which no single character could be aware of. A collection of surveillance techniques which together contribute to much disparate knowledge about the movements, actions, conversation, appearance, etc. of an individual is sometimes called omniscient technology. The word omniscient characterizes a fictional character in the Devin Townsend album Ziltoid the Omniscient. Omniscience in Buddhist India. The topic of omniscience has been much debated in various Indian traditions, but no more so than by the Buddhists. After Dharmakirti's excursions into the subject of what constitutes a valid cognition, Shantaraka to the first Pound Eater and his student Kamalullah thoroughly investigated the subject in the Tattvasam Graha and its commentary the Panjika. The arguments in the text can be broadly grouped into 4 sections: the refutation that cognitions either perceived, inferred, or otherwise, can be used to refute omniscience. A demonstration of the possibility of omniscience through apprehending the selfless universal nature of all knowables, by examining what it means to be ignorant and the nature of mind and awareness. A demonstration of the total omniscience where all individual characteristics are available to the omniscient being. The specific demonstration of Shakyamuni Buddha's non-exclusive omniscience. See also. References. External links. Omniscience entry by Edward Wieringa in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Omniscience and Divine Foreknowledge article in the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Is God All-Knowing?